Hi there, I'm Drew Burston and I play bass with the Sultans of String. I'm super excited to be here with you today to share a little bit of info about one of my favorite instruments on the planet, the double bass. I want to share with you the history of the instrument today, give you a little bit of the background, and also give you a little practical lesson on how you can build your own walking bass line. All right, so let's get started. We're going to hop in our time machine and head way back to 1490 when the first viola da gambas were made. Now, they would have been 6 and 7 string instruments, fretted, and played sitting down much like a cello. Now, there's some controversy over whether the double bass origins come from viola da gambas or from the violin family, and it's kind of undisputed, a bit of both perhaps. But the viola da gamba was tuned in fourths, much like the double bass, which is E, A, D, G, and it had higher strings as well for melodic playing. Now, it would have been used, the bass viola da gamba, for playing basso continuo lines, which were used to set the meter of the piece and also underline with roots the harmonic structure of the piece. And here's an example of Pachelbel's canon that would have been played in the Baroque era in the 15th and 16th century. I'm playing that today with my German bow, and the viola da gambas back in the day would have been held much like that as well. Also, I wanted to show you my French bow that I use mostly, and it's got a slightly different technique for holding it. You put your thumb in the crook here, fingers on top, and it's played like a cello or violin bow also. So I recommend that you try both of these bows, the German and the French, and see what feels best, what's most comfortable, and then find a teacher that can teach you in that technique and stick with it, and you'll see some really good results. All right, so I want to take you to 1700 now to a Paris opera house where a bassist named Montclair brought a version of a bass to the Paris Opera Orchestra. Now, it was called upon to play basso continuo lines, like I was demonstrating before, to play on choruses. But it was also used to play cool sound effects, like even on thunderstorms, like this. The double bass would go on to find its place in symphony orchestras and ensembles throughout the classical era. Now, I want to hop back in our time machine and take you up to 1940. Now, the double bass was to find another home in a different style of music, and that's called jazz. Jazz came out of New Orleans, and it was a combination of the marching band music, ragtime music, and the blues. There were a few bass players that ran with the jazz style, and they even used the bow like they use in classical music, but they combined it with the cool scatting style that jazz had created. Now, some of these bassists are Art Tatum's bassists, Slam Stewart, Oscar Pettiford, Paul Chambers. I recommend that you check them out. They've got some really cool things going on. And I want to play a little song called Jean-Pierre today, that's played with the bow and singing along at the same time, scatting. And it has a cool sound. I'll show you. Now, Paul Chambers also played bass with Miles Davis. He would even do this scatting style underneath his breath while he was walking the bass lines. If you listen to those Miles albums, you can hear him kind of humming along like this. And it gives a cool sound. It's in octave, so it almost gives the line a little more clarity. And speaking of walking bass lines, I wanted to give you a quick lesson on how to construct your own. Now, a great home for walking bass lines is a jazz blues. I want to show you a 12-bar blues in F, and I'll show you 3 major components that we can use to construct the walking line. All right, so the first one is a major scale, a very simple. And if you don't know this, you can copy it and check it. You should know all your major scales. All right, so here's an F major scale. Now, the second scale that I want to show you is a chromatic scale, and we use it a lot in walking bass lines. So I'll take you up to the 5th on a chromatic scale, and you can check out what that sounds like. So there you go. Now, I want to give you a third tool, which is very simple. It's like an arpeggio, and it involves the root, 3rd, 5th, and 6th. Sounds like this. Root, 3rd, 5th, 6th. And if you move it around to any root, you'll get kind of like a swing sounding bass line. So now what I'm going to do to demonstrate for you is I'm going to combine all 3 of those elements, and you can hear what it sounds like on a 12-bar blues. Here we go. Chromatic scale, arpeggio, root 3, 5, 6. A major scale. All right, so that's your first 12-bar walking blues in F. Now, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the function of the bass player and what our responsibilities are in the band. And number 1 is to have a good solid rhythm. There's a bassist, Ray Brown, that played with a lot of jazz groups, Ella Fitzgerald, and had his own trio for a while. And his job was to mainly support the band by playing a good solid quarter note with 1 finger, good time. I recommend that you use a metronome and start with it slower if you're playing difficult passages, and work it up to quicker tempo. All right, so here's a little example of Ray Brown's kind of nice clear attack, just using 1 finger. And you can hear kind of a nice top end on that. And he would even use it to solo, just 1 finger. All right. And our other job as a bassist is to have open ears all the time and work on your harmony and scales and arpeggios, compose your own lines. And I think we'll leave it there. And I wish you all the best in the bass and music, and have a great time.